Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey, chapter 375. It is the first day of the week, aka the Kamehameha workout. I am feeling great. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today. What if Indiana? Population past you. So first of all, why Indiana? Just because it sounds like a place, really. And honestly, I can't think of another state that would go better than Indiana. I was thinking Montana, but nah, I just like the way that Indiana sounds. So that's why. But it's a place. What ifsville, basically, if you would like to talk about it in a specific sense. I talked about it in the previous episode right here about mistakes that you've made in the past coming back and haunting you and all this other stuff. But basically that entire idea is just like, old mistakes coming back to be in your life and show you what's going on. But there are people who go into this, have these things, and then start, instead of learning from it, because we've talked about that in a previous episode right here about learning your lessons from why are you holding on to certain things. But this is the opposite of that, where instead of letting things go or learning from it or your brain is trying to show you what's going on, instead you go to what ifsville. And in what ifsville, you start living a life of what if scenarios, going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole of just trying to change and basically cope with any single type of minute change that you could have possibly done in certain scenarios that would have changed the things forever. So there are people who get to the point where it becomes ludicrous in how much of a little change they would believe would make the biggest change ever. If I only got her red roses instead of white roses, things like that. Sure, that might be a detail that you're thinking of, but it's the detail that in essence doesn't necessarily even matter. So in theory, today we're going to be discussing what ifville, or just what if city that a lot of people end up finding themselves in, because a lot of them will stay there and make themselves a permanent resident of that and usually use drugs or alcohol or something in order to stay there and basically moan about the possibilities of the future that isn't real, So we'll talk about that and all the things that go along with that when we get to Mother Base.
All right, so started this day off with tips, which were pretty good. But anyways, back to the main subject matter for today. What if Indiana? Now, why Indiana and why an actual physical place? Well, because it's a mentality more so than any place. And also, like I said before, it just sounds like a city in somewhere, middle America. And what's the most middle America state? Indiana. There's probably something more middle America like Oklahoma, but there's Gary in Indiana, which means there could be any other name of a city, honestly. So that's why I call it that. But the main reason why I wanted to call it as a location is because I think that it's a place that people become residents of. I think everybody in the world really goes through that city of the what if temptation, where they kind of go down each scenario as time progresses, trying to figure out what went wrong, maybe even what went right, just depending on what the scenario was. But the what if part is what kills a lot of people. A lot of people end up staying there. A lot of people keep thinking about it over and over again to the point where they make it their whole life. And that's why I call it a city, because the population is them, really. And some people live there forever. Other people pass by for a few moments. Other people stay there for quite some time. Maybe even they go back every time they get drunk or whatever other vice that gets them to lose their current consciousness and go to a different plane. And then they kind of just go there and visit that. Everyone visits that area. It's not an uncommon thing, but it is more uncommon to live there, because I think a lot of people end up living there not knowing that they are living there. They are mentally in the what if zone, trying to analyze every single little detail of what they did on one certain thing in their life, and then pick apart all of the little details that make certain events happen in their life. And it kind of sucks, because sometimes you get to the point where it becomes a neurosis where they are literally looking at every single possible thing being a reason why things didn't work out, down to the color of the shirt that they wore that day, or the sock, or something along those lines. And because of that, that kind of translates over into other parts in their life, where all of a sudden, let's say they wore a black shirt the day that something bad happened to them, and then from then on out, they stop wearing that color, or things like that. Small but precious details in their mind that in reality have no real effect on the bigger picture of things, but they are so stuck within that city that they can't see that it doesn't really matter. Regardless, some of these things were just going to happen. There are certain life events that you cannot escape from. So that's why it's important to remember to not be a permanent resident of such a town, especially because people get stuck there, and you see it all the time, how people can really just be there, or even go back when, let's say, you're hanging out with them, and it's kind of like, all right, brother, I understand, like, I get it, I've been there before, but you got to move on, or else you're just going to be here forever. I think that the biggest thing is that people have the trouble from moving on. And I think that moving on is something that you really have to learn on your own and figure out what you can do, and not really go backwards, because I think a lot of people end up going backwards trying to relive moments. A lot of the time, a lot of movies, TV shows, and other forms of entertainment are trying to go and relive certain parts of the past so you can fix certain mistakes that you've made, or just trying to fix what you feel like was wronged you, and it sucks because it's not like that at all. Time and events don't work like that, because the moment that you've made the decision is the moment that the decision is done. So thus you are a new person and always looking at it. You can see like a picture right here of multiple universes. The theory that, you can go through different timelines dependent on small little incremental factors. And although this is a completely different concept in a certain sense, this is something that I feel like a lot of people end up playing through, trying to figure out what it goes in each individual essence. But I think fundamentally the issue is, regardless of whether you do all these what if things, they always lead to the what if in good scenario, which is not accurate at all to the reality of the situations of whatever people are hanging on to. More likely than not, nothing would happen. Nothing different would happen. You got the girl pink roses instead of red roses, something small like that, and all of a sudden she loves you. But that's the thing. Most of the time, it is the what if into the good part. They never really think about the what if into something worse, because obviously that's what we would want. We wouldn't want that, and that's in our fantasy that these people who are visiting this town live in, is the fantasy of it. What if it goes well? Not realizing that what if it goes terrible is just as equally an opportune thing to happen. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, none of those things actually happened. So moving on from it is probably the best bet. But they're too optimistic in the ideal a scenario for them going their way, when in reality, nothing works like that. Nothing ever. Sure, maybe there might be like a scenario where if you would have just missed something by a minute, then X, Y, or Z wouldn't have happened. But the likelihood of those things actually happening are very slim to none. And sure, what if you did miss that, but then all of a sudden this changes something else, And that's the other butterfly effect. But that's kind of a different story for a different day.
And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercise is not filmed, none. Exercise is skipped, also none. Got everything in, thankfully. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand here. What if Indiana? So the main reason why I want to discuss this is because I think this is metaphorically, it is a city in which everybody, the world has visited. Some people have made their their permanent residence there, which is the worst thing ever because they want to stay there. But I think all of us have at least visited there and been there for a few days. There have been times like that, I think, in everybody's life. It's not necessarily anybody's immune to it. I think most people have to go by there. It is very rare where you meet somebody that doesn't go go by there. It's, I would say, truly rare, but everybody has that experience where they go down that rabbit hole and into that town where they start analyzing basically all of the decisions that they made that led up to something that could have been changed, and certain things are, you can think about it. Obviously, there are certain things that you could have done in your own power, but a lot of the time, realistically, some of the things are just completely out of your hands, really. There's just some freak things that just happen, and certain things where destiny just doesn't allow you to make any changes. Kind of like the butterfly effect. At the end of the day, no matter how much you would try to change certain things in the past, the event, the main thing will happen regardless. The canon event, if you will, to use modern nomenclature. But I think that personally, the what if scenario, or living in the what if realm, really is a disaster if you stay there, because a lot of people end up basically dying there for such a long time, and it isn't even until later in life where maybe they might be able to get out, or they are just consumed by it. Hell, you can see this in even movies where all of a sudden they live their what if moment and then they kind of like pass on or whatever. I think of Titanic almost, in the sense that they were trying to let this story go, and then all of a sudden, they finally got to talk about being a mistress, and there you go. That was the one thing, and then she was like, all right, what if he survived that night? That entire idea. But I think that going there is normal, and that's the other thing, is that I think everybody has to deal with it. It's just not staying there and making sure you don't become a permanent resident, because that can really, really fuck you up in so many different ways. But some people are there now and they don't even realize it. That's the other issue, is that sometimes they will get there and they'll live that life, but not even realize that they're living that what if life the entire time, and thus kind of creating like a weird, like, permanent home without even realizing they're at a home, And those people really are truly trapped. You got to wake up and hope to God that they can open their eyes and see what's around them. But it is something that is shitty, but everybody has to deal with it. So, and this isn't like a weird societal pressure thing either. Everybody just kind of has to deal with these certain like scenarios where they think back to certain past things and then wonder, and that's pretty normal. So with that being said, though, tell me what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. I would love to know if you know anybody or are currently in the what if Indiana. I would love to know, because it'd be great. Also, let me know if there's a better state than what Indiana. I thought it was a good one. It just worked out perfectly. I also like I think subconsciously I said Indiana, because in the end it sounds like it, kind of, but maybe that's just my trying to stretch it out somewhere to make it fit. But please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy, stay safe out there, and stay cool, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!